Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today we're welcoming Laura, a high school principal and passionate cabin owner in the Adirondack Mountains, who brings a uniquely educational perspective to the cabin ownership experience. From her beginnings as a home design blogger to managing 2 cabins while balancing a demanding career in education, Laura shares valuable insights on finding escape and renewal in mountain retreat. We'll explore how she transformed a 630 square foot ski chalet box into a cozy getaway, navigated the unexpected shift when COVID hit just months after her purchase, and eventually expanded to a second A-frame cabin right down the street. Laura opens up about the challenges and joys of maintaining properties that are indoor-outdoor experiences designed to push people into nature. Whether you're curious about the financial realities of cabin investment, the intersection of education and hospitality, or how cabin ownership can become part of your legacy planning, this conversation offers both practical wisdom and honest reflection. We'll dive into everything from the evolution of cabin culture on social media to finding the right collaborators for your property, and why thinking of your cabin as an extension of your creativity might just be the most rewarding approach. Let's do it. Let's start here because we also currently have 3 dogs at our house. How many dogs do you have?
I have 2 dogs. I have like a 90-pound golden doodle and then a little 10-pound fur ball that's her best friend, Winston and Vera.
Okay, I love that.
How
We
about
also
you?
have a 9-pound Chihuahua and then a 60-pound pit lab mix. And we currently have a foster at the same time. So if anybody
Oh,
hears any dogs, that's just the life of there being 5 dogs
that's
somehow involved in this
amazing.
call. Laura, I am very excited to talk to you because I don't know if you know this, but my background is in education. And
I
when I
did
saw you
know.
were a high school principal, I
Okay.
was like, "Oh, this is my people."
Yeah.
Because I'm out of the world of education now, but you have mixed these 2 worlds of education and hospitality, and I'm really curious to hear about your experience with that because I'm gonna start here. I feel like teachers make exceptional hosts and short-term rental owner operators. Would you agree, and why or why not?
I would agree. And I agree because aren't we hosting our classrooms, every day to a myriad of kids and
Yeah.
welcoming people in? And I feel like that's our joy, is to make people feel connected and accepted and all of those things. So I do feel like it's organic. I also feel like teachers and educators need to get away so they also know what people are looking for in that downtime. And I think that's how this whole thing really started, was escaping to the mountains and figuring out what we love and then eventually turning that into sharing that with some other people.
Yeah, exactly. I do feel like I don't think people outside of education understand that teaching is legitimately the hardest job in the world. Everything else I've done, it is the hardest. Can you
Yeah.
explain to people why teachers need a break so badly?
Yeah, so you're always on. I feel like it's hard to ever come down from that. And I felt the same thing in leadership, whether I was teaching or I'm a principal now, whatever. You go to the grocery store, you're still that person to
Yeah.
somebody. And I feel like you really worry. I worry about kids, I worry about the community, I worry about the parents all the time. So it really kind of transforms into your identity. And there's very blurred lines between the workday and your personal time.
Yes. So I taught, I don't know what your district is, but I taught in a very rural area. And I would run into kids everywhere and
Yeah.
families, which I loved, right? Like it was very rewarding to feel like you're part of a community, in
Yeah.
community with your students and their families. But I would go to Walmart and run into them and they would immediately look in my cart and be like, "Oh, Miss Smith, like what are you buying?" Right? Like there was
Right.
just no opportunity to let your guard down ever.
That's very true. And I think that that's really what drew us to always escaping to the mountains in the first place, and hence why we're here talking today.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so tell me about where you are located. So where you work, and then
Sure.
where are the mountains that you would escape to?
Sure. So I work in a small town called Cohoes. We're an old mill factory town right south of the capital of New York State, of Albany, New York. So along the Hudson and Mohawk rivers. I work in this town. I live in this town. So it's a very small urban, high needs district. And we escaped to the Adirondack Mountains up to Whiteface and Lake Placid area. And we've gone there for decades. I went as a kid and then I went as a young adult and now as a mom of 2 teenagers.
Yeah. What is special about that area that you found was able to like actually create an escape for you?
Yeah, so I lived in Denver for a short stint, and
Mm.
I've traveled out west my whole childhood to national parks, and that was big for my family. So I feel like to have a space within 2 hours of a very urban area, we're 2 hours north of New York City, and then we're 2 hours from the mountains. So we live in this great spot. We're 2 hours from the ocean to head
Mhm.
over to Boston in that area. So for me, it was proximity. But there is just an energy that you get as you enter into the Adirondack State Park, and the smells and the sights and the sounds that's very different. It's juxtaposed to the life we live down here. And I feel
Yeah.
like that just welcomes you in, and you start to forget about all your woes down here and
Yeah.
just in life. And you could truly escape up there.
When did you first start thinking about either building or buying your own place in the mountains?
Yeah, so it's kind of like we just got lucky and ran into this situation. I would travel there whenever we felt like it to get away. And I'd been keeping my eye on this cute little 630 square foot ski chalet
Mhm.
box, looked like a giant shed basically. And my daughter and I said, we're just going to go up and look at it. We had been looking at it online, and it was a dream to have a camp. So we took a ride up for lunch one day and went to see it. And I called my husband on the phone and I said, I think we need to just put in an offer today. Do you trust me? I think this place is great. And he said, absolutely, let's put in an offer. And
A
it was
great husband.
yeah, great husband, new construction, weird situation. Somebody had built it and they decided to list it instead of move into it. So that rarely happens, right? That
Mhm.
you would get that sort of situation. Usually you're buying land, you're subcontracting it all out, or you're finding a contractor.
Yeah.
So all the bones were there. It was on a piece of land that had just been developed. So lots of dirt, lots of landscaping that needed to be done, but it was really a blank slate for this vision of what would just be a cozy getaway. And the goal was not to create an Airbnb or a vacation space for others. It was
Yeah.
something that we could go to. And
Yeah.
we bought it in November of 19. And then in March of 20, the whole world changed.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we had to shift gears a little bit.
What stage were you in at that point in March? So like 4 months in, had you started renting it? Were you using it just for yourself? Were you renovating it at all? Was it furnished? Like where were
Yes.
you at when that hit?
So it was furnished. It was furnished. And I think we had rented it like starting in late January of 2020. So we maybe had a couple renters to get our feet wet and try it out. And we were like, this is great. Because our initial goal was if it could help pay the mortgage and the taxes,
Yeah.
then we can vacation up here at a nominal cost. And the kids could have this experience of a second home in the mountains.
Yeah. And so then what changed about that? Because you wrote in your pre-interview form, hold on, I wrote this down. You said,
Yeah.
having our cabin is well, you said cabins, and we'll get to the second one in
Yeah.
a second. But having our cabins is grounding, and it began with a love of mountain retreats and family connection, but it's evolved into something very different. I'm wondering if that evolution happened because of COVID and that moment of pivoting, or did it happen kind of along the way?
No, I think it definitely helped with the pivoting. And I say helped because now we're in a great place. And I don't think I would have thought of that back then.
Yeah.
But, we're in the world of education. And so what that was like for teachers and school administrators during COVID. So we had this time all of a sudden, time that you never have. You don't work remotely as a teacher, that, none
Right.
of this happens. So we found ourselves with stressful situations. My husband's a teacher too, but we had time. We had time to go up there with the kids, remote woods, it was like
Right.
optimal, fresh air, hiking.
Right.
And so I think like a lot of parks and mountain areas found a huge boom in the number of people that were visiting those areas during COVID, right? So it was like, and I'm a marketing major. That was my bachelor's, and I taught business and finance. So I'm thinking, okay, this makes sense, right? You have a demand, you have a static,
Yeah.
demand that's just there. And we have this great little place. And it started kind of like friends saying, I'd love to go up there. Would you
Right.
rent it to us? I
Yeah.
have a family member that wants to go up. Would you rent it to us? And then I think that was that start of that evolution of it becoming something.
Yeah, okay, we have something here. Maybe we can share this with others and, like, maybe we can make some money off of it.
Yeah,
When
right.
COVID I think COVID hit, this is interesting because we all had this shared experience of COVID hitting at, like, exactly the same time, but geographically, every place responded differently to COVID,
Right.
both in schools, as you saw, and also in rental market. So how did your
Right.
area of New York initially respond to COVID? And then how did that response change?
Well, I think that the initial response was people, like they were everywhere, were panicked. It's New York State, and we're sort of in an epicenter of things here. And what we found were that people from the city just wanted to get away, and they were
Yeah.
scared to be in the city. So if they could get up to the mountains, they were doing that. And so we had a huge demand from families from New Jersey, New York City area, Connecticut, just looking to escape those largely populated areas and get to mountain towns. So the demand was insane.
Yeah.
And you would open a night, and you'd have to make sure you could open that night on
Yeah.
Airbnb
Because it
because it
would
was
get booked.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is different than today's market, which I'm sure we'll
Yes.
talk about. But
Yeah.
quickly it became, over the couple years after COVID, people buying up every piece of property that they could up there and driving the pricing so high that it made it difficult for locals to buy anything. It made it difficult for renters. So the economic impact has been major up there.
Yeah,
Good and bad.
2020. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
2020 changed a lot for cabin culture, I feel like. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because I had been part of it since 2016 is when we bought our first cabin, but I hadn't been connected to other people until around 2020. So it was right
Okay.
when I started like tapping into that community that I saw it starting to change. And I don't know if it's because that community didn't exist in the same way before or if I just hadn't found it. Like I'm not sure, but it feels like everyone was starting to realize, oh wait, we don't necessarily have to travel to France to have a good vacation. We actually
Right.
can't do that right now.
I
So
think you
let's
bring up such a good point, because I thought the same thing. Like, have I been missing out on something, or am I at the like precipice of this? And
right.
then connecting, and people like you, and following Cozy Rock, and following all these places that are incredible, and going, oh my God, this community that exists is amazing, and just getting inspiration and ideas.
Right, and so was it like this community didn't exist or it wasn't really big on Instagram, which is how we all
Right.
kind of found each other,
Right. Yeah.
and started connecting, but what I've loved is that once it did start existing, it doesn't feel like it feels like a very collaborative community because
Yes.
a lot of us are so spread out. But I'm curious, even within your region, there's a lot of cabins in the Adirondacks. How
A
have you
ton.
found like a more local community, or is that trickier because you're actually all in the same market?
I think the big thing in the Adirondacks, as I'm sure most mountain towns, is that it's very spread out. So proximity
Okay.
and location, the business thing is
Yeah.
where you need to be, because people that have purchased on the outskirts, so if we're 10, 15 minutes away from downtown Lake Placid, and we're 5 minutes from the ski mountain, people that bought 30 minutes away, I'm hearing from my team up there, my cleaner, my maintenance crew, that it's been a rough couple of months. And
Yeah.
so I feel like community is important, and doing things where you share each other's handles, and you do reels with one another. But I think that it's becoming, for us anyway, in this region of upstate, it's become competitive. And now what I'm also finding is, we have pretty humble, small square foot cabins, and they're simple, and they're meant to be simplistic, so you can go up and unplug
Yep.
and be in the woods.
Yep.
But now the places that are coming out are places that we could never afford to
Yeah.
create, and they're, can you add this amenity and that amenity?
Yeah.
And so it's become like any open market competition, like what can you do to outdo the next person? So it's
Yeah.
collaborative, but it's also competitive.
Yeah, and I think that's happening everywhere, and I think Instagram and the internet has something to do with that, and I struggle with it because I'm like, to me, cabin culture has this humility to it that I
Yes.
find really endearing, that
Yep.
it's not at least to me, when I fell in love with cabins and cabin culture, it was never about like, let's go stay at the biggest, fanciest. And maybe it's because at the time those didn't really exist. We were just like, are there enough bedrooms for all of us? Is there a kitchen? Does it open up to the living room? Is there a hot tub? Great. So I guess a hot
Right.
tub was about as fancy as it really
Yeah.
got when we first started going. But now it's like it's escalating to a level that almost makes it feel unapproachable. Like if I walk into one, I'm going to be nervous about how I move in that space and
Right.
like I don't know. It feels like sometimes it's losing the humility.
Yeah, and to me, the whole point of it is simplistic. These cabins,
Right.
like yours, are, inviting and welcoming and kind of force you to, you could either read a book alone if you want up in a space, but you could also cook
Yeah.
with your friends and family and gather, and that's part of
Yeah.
it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And yours are both small. So tell me a little
Yes.
bit about why you chose. You said you found it online and it was this small box. I think that's how you described it.
Yeah.
And so I love that amidst all of this that is growing and getting fancier, you became enamored with a small box. So tell us, like, what was it about that one? And what was it when you
Yeah.
saw it in person that you were like, you're just gonna have to trust me, but I think we should do this?
It had everything you need. Because what do you really need?
I know.
You, we live in a world of abundance. And it's a contagious thing, right? You get more, you want more, you need
Yeah.
more. And
Yeah.
so to me, it had just this warm, bright, inviting living space where you had just enough room to cook, just enough room to sit down and have a glass of wine, to
Yeah.
sleep, to shower. But it
Yeah.
drove you outside.
Yeah.
You want to be out. So it's an indoor outdoor experience, and
Mhm.
that's what our friends have come to love about going up there. Now, the other property that we purchased, which is down the street, and we purchased that by meeting someone and saying hi and being friendly and hiking with them and getting to know them. So it never even went to market. It was like, oh, I'm moving. I have this little A-frame. I don't know if you guys are interested. And we said, can we please look,
Yeah.
before you do anything? And that's not much bigger, but that has its own vibe and its own energy to it. So,
Yeah.
but that's still, being small is an indoor outdoor
Yeah.
experience. So to us, that is the point. The point is to bundle up because it's cold up here in upstate, or in
Yep.
the summer, put on your bug spray because you're
Yeah.
going outside, and that's part of it, because it to me, it's a sensory experience. You're smelling the pine, you're by the campfire, you're cooking, you're telling stories. It's a simplistic, understated way of living.
And I feel like that's what I love about cabin culture is it's like a stepping stone for folks who might not want to go camping, might
Yeah,
not want to hang up a hammock and like they're not that outdoorsy, but they
right.
do want to sit around a campfire. They do want to go on a hike during the day and then come home to some place where if it's raining, you're not going to worry about a puddle at your feet in your tent, you know?
Exactly. We had
Yeah.
RV'd up there for years. We had tent camped
Yeah.
with young pre-kids. We had tent
Yep.
camped, and then it was like, oh, let's
Brave.
get a little pull camper. And we
Uh-huh.
had done that. And it was like, well, we love it up here. We're always coming here. Why don't we just find a little structure? We don't need much more than that pull camper. So a 600
Yeah.
square foot cabin was like, we're great.
Yeah. Okay. I do have questions for you about occupancy and saturation because you entered the market the first time at this moment where it felt like a lot of people were also entering the market. And then how long was it before you bought a second one? So talk me through, if you don't
Yeah.
mind, since you were a business and finance
Yeah.
teacher. Talk me
Yeah.
through how it went from one to two so quickly and how you felt the confidence financially that that was a good move.
Yeah, so we used home equity in our dwelling down here to have enough money to put on a down payment for the cabin, and we bought it pre-COVID, so we bought it for under $200,000, dirt cheap in comparison to what you would get for now. So we felt like we weren't super overly invested in it. We had good margins, and market saturation, like you said, wasn't what it was, but we were booking, like, our booking rate was super high because that was the demand.
Yeah.
So we bought that in late 19, and then in 2021, in the early summer of 21, we found out that our neighbor was moving down the street, and so we
Yeah.
closed on that in September, late August, September of 21. So it
And that was
it was
still during the
close.
peak. It
Yeah,
hadn't started dropping. We didn't notice the drop until like end of 21, maybe early
yes,
2022.
yes, yeah. So I mean, if it went to market, we would have been outbid, but
Yeah.
he wanted it to go to somebody that he knew would take care of it and appreciated it. We were up there, we were respectful. That was big for us to, yes, we're renting our space. We understand some of you live here year round, and we're not trying to be disrespectful to
Yeah.
that. So we're trying to blend in the best we can, take the best care of our property that we can, and make sure that we're helping the local economy in a positive way. So I
Yeah.
feel like that was a good karma thing. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how I look at it.
I like that. So then the first one you used home equity to then I'm assuming put a down payment down on that
Yes.
one. And then for the second one, was it just that you had made enough money from almost 2 years of hosting
Yeah.
that you could then put a down payment on the
We
second
had
one?
we had some money in savings, and then it was a home equity line of credit, so we had only drawn what we had drawn, and we had additional draw that we could use. So savings, some money from the HELOC, and then the mortgage rates were dirt cheap. I think
Yeah.
our mortgage rate on our cabin is like, I want to say like 2.99%, which is crazy to think now that
My
that
God,
was a
folks
thing.
looking to buy should not listen to this. That's so
Right.
disheartening. That was the time to buy.
That was the time.
Okay, so then what have you seen in the area? So now that was 3 years ago,
Yeah.
and a lot of us have shared the experience of, like, tons of people flooded into the market at that time, and the demand now that people are traveling internationally again. I
Yeah.
don't think the demand has dropped back to pre-COVID. I do think that during COVID, people started to realize the value in these kinds of vacations and maybe are now traveling internationally, but still taking, like, long weekends or whatever at cabins, but it has gone
Yeah.
down. At least
Well,
for us at Boone, it has gone down.
and don't you think, and I don't know if this is just because I'm hypersensitive to it, but I think there's been a real transformative space in health and wellness too. So cabin culture kind of
Mm,
goes hand in hand with
that's
that, right?
interesting.
People are going
Yeah,
on these weekend cabin retreats, or they
yeah,
understand work-life balance, or they're still hybrid. So they can go away for a 3-day weekend and work. So I do
yep.
think that, yeah, I agree with you. It has not gone back to pre-COVID. And it's maybe steadied out, and maybe this is the new norm, you
That's
know?
what I'm starting to think is that this is the new norm. Though for us in Boone, which we were hit the hardest, like we've seen it dip the most there because of saturation, but also Helene. And I'm
Oh,
struggling to decipher how much of it is like
wow.
still post Helene hesitancy and how much of it is just
Sure.
this is the new normal. And we're in spring, which is the worst season of the year there. So
We
we're seeing
call
it
it,
like
yeah,
extreme right now.
we call it mud season up here.
Yes.
It's
In
brown and
Maine, that's what
wet
we call
and
it.
gross, and yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I mean, you can still enjoy it if you're going for a cabin weekend with friends, family, to be with them.
Yep.
It's just the draw of the summer. It's not there's no skiing, the hiking is muddy. It's just not the best time of year to be there. So you had
Exactly.
mentioned that collaboration was a big part of your I don't even know if you used the word marketing, but it was a big explanation you said for your occupancy rates, which were pretty high. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious and whether it was intentional or not, but what strategies have you used to keep your occupancy pretty high amidst saturation?
Yeah, so some of it's been simple stuff like there's a company upstate of mine that's got a nice presence on Instagram, and they do a lot of cabin culture like coffee mugs and hats. So it's approaching them and saying, "Hey, would you like to do some sort of a giveaway or so, you know what I mean, and connect." And
Yeah.
then some of it's been, "Oh my god, I love this photographer. I'm going to message them and say, "Hey, do you ever have a chance to come up here and stay here, and we'll give you
Yeah.
a few nights." And some of it's been paid, although I think the best experiences have been just more collaborative ones, like, people that genuinely love this and they're in this space and they're sharing things, or a little
Yeah.
local company, that Adirondack tea company that wants to showcase their tea. You know what I mean? That's the stuff that
Yeah.
for us. And to look at our Instagram, we have only like 3,000 followers or something like that. So to me, it's, yes, would I love to have 100,000 followers, but that hasn't equated to bookings.
Right. I talk about this all of the time.
Yeah.
I don't think that more followers is necessarily I think you just get more people who wanna replicate what you're doing. Where
Yeah.
are the blueprints? What paint color is that? Where did you source this? I don't think it translates. Some, for sure. I don't think it can
Yes.
hurt. But with a loyal 3,500 followers, you can keep and this is what it sounds like is working for you. You can keep
Yeah.
really booked and get numbers that make it make it a well-run business.
That seems to be working for us, and just keeping it simple. We're not
Yeah.
trying to get into the space of competing with some of these other places that that's not what our market is, and that's not the price point we're trying to be in either. So just I feel like now that we know our target market and our brand and who we are, we're just kind of sticking with that formula because it seems to work. But I do like to have fun and try new things with meeting new people, and
Yeah.
inviting new people to really see how do they see the space through their
Yes.
eyes. Yeah.
Yes.
Fun.
So when it comes to that though, I find the common complaint I hear and feel is discernment. There's so many potential collaborators out there. How do
Yeah.
you discern which ones are going to be a good fit for you and your target market, which ones are going to have a positive ROI. Like these are all
Yeah.
really hard questions to answer. How do you approach that discernment?
I've used a couple of the same people now over and over,
Does
and
it work?
they're genuine. Their work was
Yeah.
amazing, and they delivered what they promised they were going to deliver. I last year, for the first time, spent a really good chunk of change on like a well-known influencer who's very talented and is amazing, but I didn't get some of the deliverables to this day, and they had canceled on me twice right before the event. So, you lose the booking, then you lose, nobody's
So
going to book
unprofessional.
that, right? And then, so for me, it hasn't been like, oh, the more money you spend, the better. It's been like
No.
you said, finding the right person that represents what you're doing and maybe has a following that's local to you, because Instagram's great and followers are great, but ultimately you need the booking. So I need somebody that's going to actually come. I shouldn't be advertising in Texas. They're probably not coming
Right.
to upstate New York,
Right. Right. I don't know. I'm just going to throw this out there, but I think that teachers and school leaders tend to be very, very data driven,
Yes,
and so
yes,
I think this could be a skill that we're just better at because we've had
agreed,
experience doing this in other
agreed.
settings. Because I do study, and I literally have written down every influencer that I've worked with. I don't know if I've ever admitted this on the podcast before, but how many followers we had when they came, how many we
Ooh,
had when they left, and
yes,
then what bump we saw when they posted photos to give me information about whether or not it was worth it and should I hire them again,
wow,
right? Because I wanted that data. Now, what's harder to track is not all bookings. Like a lot of our bookings will say we found you on Instagram, but that doesn't tell me how they found me on Instagram, what
right.
post, right? So like then it's hard to connect it to bookings and not just people who are following you on Instagram. So it's not perfect. It's not the same, but student achievement data, it's like, well, is the assessment good? And if the assessment isn't
Yep.
good, then actually what does that data tell us anyway? So I think data is hard, but
That's the
we
world we
value what
live
we
in, right?
measure.
Yeah, that's
What
the world we live
exactly? We
in. Yeah.
value what we measure what we value. So if the whole point in bringing in collaborators is to help get more exposure, then we have to think about it a little critically. I want to ask you who that was later because people always are asking me for recommendations and this is what I wonder if I don't know if I should talk about this on the podcast. I rarely think about that to myself of like what should I share or not in the podcast.
Yeah.
But I think something that creators maybe they realize, I don't know, and they probably do the same thing about us, but is that cabin owners talk a lot about the creators and the collaborators that they've had experiences with and
Right.
if they were good, bad. I have very few bad ones, but some disappointing ones. And
Sure.
like and we share that with each other because we're trying to look out for each other. You want to get that honest feedback from someone about like, was this one worth it? Did it pay off or not? And that's going to be
Exactly.
my deciding factor. Honestly, that's how I
Exactly.
discern now is I just look at their portfolio. What other cabins have they been to? And then I just message them and say, hey, what was your experience like?
Yeah, because I think what people don't, you see the cabin, you don't see the family or the human behind it. And these are people trying to probably run their own business or working full
Yeah.
time, and then they're trying to make payments on things. So yes, it's a creative artistic community, but at the end of the day, there's some logistics and functionality that have to happen to make it work.
Right. Right. And so
And
to
so
your
looking
point,
out for each other is huge.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so to your point about like someone canceling multiple times, like we are running businesses, that is very problematic and
Yes.
unprofessional. And you don't see that in the photos that they choose to post on theirs. They're also running businesses. So I've had some influencers who come and it's clear that they're not there to meet my needs, but they're clear they want the shots for their own portfolio. So they're
Sure.
producing a
Yeah.
bunch of content that is great for their portfolio to use, but like I'm not actually going to use much of this at all. And the
Yeah.
only way that you can figure that out is by talking to other cabin owners.
I agree. It's word of
Yeah.
mouth business, and the word of mouth is through probably social media because that's
Yeah.
the world of this cabin culture. But I
Yeah.
do agree wholeheartedly.
And it becomes easier to talk previously, like I'm saying before, like Instagram, we would have had to ask a photographer, hey, do you have any references you can send me?
Right.
But we don't
Yeah.
have to do that because literally they're all tagged on their portfolio. So you can go on to it and be like, oh, I know this person. I'm just going to message them. Or I don't know this person, but I'm going to message them and see what their experience is. I find it fascinating when I do that, the things that people talk about, the number one thing that comes up is whether or not they canceled or rescheduled because that throws off our
Yes.
business.
Yes.
So if they had any difficulty scheduling, that is the number one thing that they will talk about.
Yeah, because it has such a like ripple effect. You're probably
Mhm.
banking on that weekend booking to pay for some invoice
Yeah.
of some bill for that month, right?
Yeah,
So, yes, you want to be courteous and you understand they have a business too, but at the end of the day, there's a level of professionalism
that's right.
and right
That's right.
respect. Yep.
Yep. And then the second thing that people most often talk about is the quality of the photos, which makes sense, or the
Sure.
content. How usable was it? How much of the content that they delivered? So, one, how much content did they deliver? And then how usable was that content?
Exactly.
Yep.
What
And
I've found is the ones that I've had the best experience with too, always ask me before their stay, like, is there
yeah,
anything specific you're looking for? If I'm looking to update the website and I need a landscape image, not a portrait image, because I'm
yeah,
not going to put it on a story. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like just
yeah,
small things like that. Um, or I need a video content, whatever it is. I feel like
yeah.
those have gone really well.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk names for 1 second because I do wanna shout out Levi Kelly, who came, and when he delivered the photos, which I didn't even know he was delivering photos, I just thought it would go on his YouTube channel, and I was like, "Cool, yeah, come stay." But then he delivered photos, and almost every single one of them was vertical, and I messaged him, and they were great, and I messaged him, and I said, "Levi, you know exactly what I use," and he's like, "Yeah, I pay attention to your Instagram, and I know what the algorithm likes," and he didn't even ask me.
Wow.
He's just good at
Yeah.
Instagram and he knew, yeah, you make a lot of reels, so vertical content is what you need. And I was like, damn, you read my mind. And so,
Yeah.
yes, I think it's great if they ask, but like in that case, because often when they ask, I'm like, I don't know, whatever you want, it's fine. And so for him to like read and know exactly what I needed, I was like, okay, yeah, that was
Yeah.
pretty good.
Amazing.
So then the third thing that I think comes up a lot that I've heard people say, or I've said to other people, is how they left the space
Oh,
because
yes.
our cleaners mean a lot to us. So even if they
Sure.
weren't like a bad guest, the ones that leave it spotless, the cleaner will be quick to mention, like, oh my gosh, I could barely tell anyone was here. And
Yes.
because our cleaners are such a big part of our business, treating my cleaner well is like the best thing that you can do for me.
How hard is it, right, to find a good
I
cleaner?
know. I know it's
Like,
so hard.
yeah, like property management and good cleaners make or
Yes,
break your whole
yes,
business. Especially
yes,
you live away from your
yes,
properties, I live away from my property,
yes,
so I'm relying on them 24/7,
yes.
and it's huge.
Right, and so if someone leaves it messy, it's not like they'll necessarily quit, but, like, we try to take care of our cleaners well, and so for them to do the same thing,
Yes.
yeah, that is the one area that I have felt competitive. I'm not generally very competitive in the cabin space, I think there's,
Yeah.
like, enough people for all of us to succeed, but I won't give my cleaners names, especially in Boone,
Yeah.
because it's like so many checkouts are on the same day, and I'm like, if
Yes.
I recommend you to someone else and suddenly you're not available to clean my cabin, that is the only thing that I'm not competitive about,
Yes.
but, like, protective of. Everything else, I'm
Protective.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll tell you
Protective.
anything. I'll send you whoever I use. It's just cleaners that I won't because it's so hard to find good ones.
It'll make or break a business.
Yeah. If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. Okay,
Agreed.
so going back to you were talking about collaborations. You had said collaborations and word of mouth were your two biggest reasons for your high occupancy rates. I'm assuming word of mouth is like amongst guests telling other people. Like, how do you know that? How do you track that?
Well, I've also done like giveaways for, okay, if they're having a ball for American Cancer Society
Huh?
and somebody approaches me, I'll give away a 2-night stay. So I've done a lot of giveaways for things like that too, where people go,
Have
oh,
those
I
gone
saw
well
your
for you?
cabin. yeah, I saw your cabin at this thing and I, put in a raffle ticket for it or whatever. I try to always say yes to those things if they come my way.
Okay, I have not had good luck with those, but I've also never viewed them as a marketing thing. I always viewed them as
Okay.
like, "Oh, I'm donating. This is nice." But that is a very good point that
Yeah. And
everyone who puts in for it.
right. Cause they're seeing you're getting like advertising
Yes,
exposure. Right. And I don't, to me, it's like, I feel so blessed that I have these spaces and if I can give something like that. And
that's how I feel.
I've also had the, I won your thing and I'm booking it. Oh, and it's 2 nights before and I have to cancel. I'm so sorry. And I have
Uh-huh.
to say, well, just so I'm not sure if I can make it work, but we'll do our best because those 2 nights I can't rebook now. And so there's a
I
lot of that.
Yes, that's what I haven't had work well is because they're not really paying for it. So they haven't gone through the process of like
Right.
seeing your cancellation policy and they just kind of think like, "Oh, I can reschedule or whatever." Yes, that's been the
Yes, I agree.
challenge.
Yeah.
But I think this is really interesting that like if the little thing that says put in for this cabin, if it has your Instagram handle, people are probably looking it up on Instagram,
Right.
following you, hoping they'll win, and then they keep following you and maybe end up booking later. That's
Yes,
interesting.
I think so. And I think like small town USA, here's a silly example. I'm a school administrator. We work with school attorneys. We're waiting for somebody to show up to a meeting. What do you do? And then you get talking. Oh my God, well, my friend goes up to the Adirondacks. They're a skier. Next thing you know, when I'm saying word of mouth, a lot of it's very organic like that. And then it's
Yeah.
that's Juniper Hill and
Yeah. That's
cool.
an interesting one because I think that's so right, and yet I have hesitated to talk about my cabins in my real life regularly.
Okay. Okay.
And I think but I've heard other women say this because I think it's like most people's investments are like in the stock market, right? So
Sure.
when people are walking around, you don't see like a number above their head, like, oh, that's their net worth, right? You like have no idea how much money people or how frugal they are, how much
Sure.
they've saved, how much they've inherited. You have no idea. So we make
Right.
assumptions about wealth based on like what car they drive, what job they have, or if you see their house, which you often don't, how big their house is, right? But
Absolutely.
the minute someone knows that you have a second property, or God forbid, a third property like you do, or God
Mhm.
forbid, four, right? It's like
Mhm.
suddenly
Mhm.
then there become assumptions about wealth, incorrect or correct, and that
Right.
makes me uncomfortable. And so I often will like not bring it up, but what you're saying is these are all marketing opportunities.
They are, and I think they're an extension of you, and there's a pride in that, right? Like, we
I
curated
know.
these spaces.
I know.
We envisioned them and turned them into something that is real. So, it's just like to me, it's like anything that you're proud of. If you're an artist
Yeah.
and you shared something or you're a musician, not to sound cheesy, right? But it's like an extension of your creativity, and look at these
Yeah.
spaces that I've created for people to get away.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
should be proud of it, and yet I still feel discomfort whenever it comes up.
Yes. Right. Well, and right, like there's this feeling of privilege,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
this
yeah.
feeling of, oh my God, and that's to me where I balance it. Like I feel so grateful if it's vacant a weekend and I can say to a friend or a neighbor, hey, the
Yeah.
cabin's open. Would you like to go up this weekend? To us, that's huge. And for my family too, to have my own kids and my husband to get away and do some stuff for
Yes.
us too and have that balance is just so important.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is I do shy away from it, but on the internet, I don't feel I mean, occasionally I feel like in the current political climate, I think I've shied away from the internet a little bit more because it just feels like
Yeah.
I don't know that you need to hear my voice talking about my second or third home as much as we need to hear voices about like what's happening in the world and what we do about it. I
Yeah.
think but before that, I think talking about these on the internet didn't feel as problematic for me personally because I was like, "Oh, I'm just sharing the process of building it, the
Sure.
process of decorating it, the process of hosting at it," right? And it was
Yeah.
to an audience of strangers. So it just felt like, "Oh, you're choosing to follow this. You are opting into being here."
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think there's probably a balance of sharing and feeling pride in what you've curated versus that sort of, well, look at me, right? I mean, that's not what
Yeah.
we're doing anyway, but we're business owners and you are your business. So you're running that and you're marketing that.
Right. And we
Yeah.
are proud of it. Yeah, I'm proud. Right, like we should be proud of it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. You
Absolutely.
designed the hell out of your 2 cabins, which is where I would like to go next. So,
Okay.
Laura, in 2013, you started a home design blog, and I feel
Oh
like
my
this
God.
was
Yes.
in the height okay, I was a big home design blog follower. So I would love for you to share with us a little bit, because this is, you have a lot of experience in thinking about home design, which I'm sure then went into these houses that you've designed and decorated.
Yeah.
So tell us about the blog.
The blog was like something that my friends were like, "What are you doing? This is so silly." But it was like I had young kids, I was teaching, and I just needed something creative. And I loved always fussing around and decorating my own house. It was like if I could take pictures of things I'm doing, and we had built our home in 2013. So you
Okay.
talked about that a second
Okay.
ago, the process of putting in a patio, the
Yeah.
process of building a fence, right? So
You had a lot
I
of
went on,
content.
yeah, I had content to share, and going to country living magazine parties, and whatever I could do to kind of get the name out there, and do an article, do a collaboration, get window treatments, get paint, because I'm
Yeah.
collaborating with some company. It was really fun, and it grew enough that people were hiring me to go and do small jobs for them in their home, and some wanted larger jobs. And my brother is an electrician and is a contractor, so we started a company in 2018 where we were building residential homes, and it got really big. And now him and his wife run it, because I stepped back, and I have the cabins, and I have some other things. We still have some shared properties that he and I run and co-own. But it really evolved into like this silly idea of decorating and taking pictures. Who's going to look at that? To a business, to feeling confident. I don't know if I would have felt confident enough to say to my husband, like, let's buy this cabin,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
already know in my head what it's going to look like when I get my hands on it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I knew from that process that I could do it. And DIYing didn't scare me, and doing landscaping didn't scare me. It didn't scare my husband and my kids. So anyway, I think it was a confidence builder to get
Yes.
ultimately to where I am with residential real estate.
I love this, because this, I think, pushes us all to think about like where our cabins actually started, because it was likely way earlier than when we
Yes,
made the move, because
yes.
it does take, I was going to say balls, but it takes ovaries, I think, to
It
really,
does take ovaries.
yeah,
Yes.
to really
Yeah.
be like, I'm going to take this big financial leap because I believe in myself and my vision. And it's
Yep.
hard to do that if you haven't had some practice with that beforehand. And one of
Yeah.
my favorite quotes is like, if you don't cringe looking back at your early work, then you started too late. And so I love
Yes.
this idea that your friends were like making fun of you for it, because it was like you started right on time the minute you had the idea, and then look where it
Yes.
led.
Yeah, I mean, if the blog is still live, don't go to it. I don't even know what it looks like. I haven't touched it in years, you know what I mean? But at one point, it was my pride and joy, and it was an outlet,
Yeah.
and it was a way to write and share. But it's
Yeah.
really the same thing, right? Connection, sharing, creativity. It's those same qualities that we have, I think, as cabin curators and
Yeah.
owners that we're running. We're just looking for that same connection.
Yes, yes, and
Yeah.
I think this goes back to what makes teachers exceptional hosts, is that we're really good multitaskers, and the fact
Yes.
that you were blogging and working at a school
Yeah.
and then starting a home construction business is just like, oh, and raising children, by the way, you were also
Yeah. Those
raising kids.
kids. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, but that feels intimidating to your normal person, but to someone who can lead a school, you're like, "Okay, yeah, I got this." You have the organization systems you need to, like, keep all the balls in the air.
You do, and you have a sense of community to support you, right? You have a
Yeah.
built-in sense of community. If you're doing it right, you've got that group.
But now you're about to get your PhD, is that correct?
Technically, it's an EDD, but yes, it's a
ED.
doctorate
Okay.
and in education, and I'm defending in July. And so that was another reason to step away from the residential construction company,
Yeah.
because it just that was not going to be possible. Just the
Yeah.
amount of writing I was never prepared for. So,
Right.
but again, I kind of think it's the philosophy of like living with no regrets. You're either going to be exhausted and working really hard and having a lot of discipline, or you're going to be looking back and feeling like, man, I should have done that. I should have done the cheesy blog that I wanted to start. I should have bought the little cabin when the
Yeah.
price was right. And I just don't want to look back on my life like that. So instead, we live with structured debt, and we live with exhaustion and other things,
Structured
right?
debt.
Yes.
Okay, well, the next topic of conversation was gonna literally be exhaustion, and I'm just curious, like, okay, because I am about to turn 41, and that has always been my attitude. I've always just kind of chased my dreams and, like, jumped without thinking about it, and then I'm like, "I will figure out a way to make it work." But I'm starting to get tired, And I'm just
Yeah,
wondering,
girl.
like, are you feeling tired?
I'm 46 and yes, and I'm feeling tired and I'm also feeling like I just speak my truth. Like this is what I feel.
Yeah.
This is my truth, right? That veil of pleasing everybody is, you're still customer service and all that, but this is
Yeah.
who I am. This is what. So I just think as I've gotten older too, like I don't spend time on the things that are unimportant because I don't have the time and I don't have the energy. Yeah.
I think it's actually the exhaustion is actually a necessary blessing of forcing us to prioritize and forcing us
Yes.
to discern in our own lives what are the things that are really life-giving. I was just having this conversation with another cabin owner via text yesterday, and she's making decisions to stop building where she is, and I'm
Okay.
making decisions to not build anymore where I am, and it's where she's younger than me, but it's the
Yeah.
same idea. It's forcing us to say, actually, family and travel matter more right now. Actually, for me,
Yes.
fostering dogs matters more right now,
Yes. Yes.
politics matters more. Like things
Right.
they're bigger things, and it forces the lack of energy as we get older forces us to really decide what's important, and I think that's valuable.
Yeah. What are you feeding your soul with?
Yeah. And I don't
And if
think
it's not feeding it right or giving back in some way that's, the bucket filler book when we were
yeah.
teachers, it's like, is it
Yeah.
filling your bucket or emptying your bucket? It's kind of that same thing.
Yes. My husband taught preschool and he uses that quote. I had never
Okay.
heard it until I met him, and he says all the time, "Is it filling your bucket? Who are the bucket fillers?" And then, "Don't empty my
Yes,
bucket." If I say something that, I'm like
100%.
he's like, "Don't empty my bucket, that makes me happy." And I think that's a good thing that this metaphorical, like, bucket is a good thing to think about. If we all had one, how full is it right now? And full of what?
Yes.
And is it bringing you joy?
Right, exactly. And the idea too of I think filling it to the point where also there's like some legacy stuff. So
Mhm.
whether it's you have family or you want to turn around down the road and sell these and invest in something else, whatever you want to do. I'm always thinking forward like I have the blessing of two kids and I have two cabins, so maybe they can continue on with these
Ah,
someday if they want the cab right because what is real estate going to look like for children and younger
right.
adults?
Look at
It's
what
so
it is right
hard.
now.
Yeah, it's so hard. So if that's something that we can gift to them and give to them, like that's huge in itself. And if not, we will have the profitability of having invested at an
Yeah,
appropriate time
yeah.
or just continuing to rent and have the return on investment of the rental. So it gives you some financial like freedom, I think, too, and choice.
I have never thought about number of cabins in terms of number of kids. Was that something that you and your husband talked
No,
about when the second one
no,
came on the
no. It's
market?
just
Okay.
like it just happened. But it was like, and I think it was born out of which cabin do you guys like better?
Yeah.
And my daughter, I like this one, and my son, I like this one. Perfect. Those are the
Oh,
ones you're gonna
great.
get.
Great.
Yeah, great. It
Because
all worked
that's
out.
so tricky. Our family camp in Maine, there was only one family camp, and my mom had a brother. And so it's like, how
Okay.
do you navigate that? And unfortunately, my mom died, so I guess that made it
Oh,
easier for my grandparents. But then
yeah.
it left like, oh, well, we're my mom's kids, and we grew up going there, and then now we don't have like
Right.
I mean, my family's great, so it's not like they're like,
Right.
"Don't come here." They're very inviting, but it's not in your family anymore, you know? So that's when
True.
my sister and I bought a camp on that same lake. But that matter
Amazing.
if you only have 1 cabin and you have 2 kids, but now
Yes.
you don't have to worry about it, you have 2
Yes,
cabins.
we're good. No, two and two. Like we're good.
But I've literally, when talking to people on this podcast, never thought about how many kids do you have and how many cabins do you have? Okay,
Yeah, and I
last
feel like when they were younger, they loved going up, and now they're 18 and 15. And so now it's a little bit like pulling teeth, like, do you want to go up on the weekends? Well, what chores do we have? Do we have to stack
uh,
wood? What do we have to do up there? Do we have to stain something? But
yeah.
we're really good about it.
Well, get used to it if you're gonna own these. That is the
That's
life
right.
of cabin ownership.
That's right.
Yeah, but pretty soon, oh my gosh, I don't envy this. You're gonna be at the phase where the older one is gonna be like, "Hey, I wanna go up with my friends. Can we have the cabin for the weekend?" And you're gonna have to
Exactly.
navigate that. Ooh, that does not sound fun,
Exactly. Yes.
but exciting for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, the last thing I wanna ask, you were a finance and business teacher, which I just feel like are skills that we do not teach enough in
Oh my
school.
God. Amen. Yes. I
So
agree.
if there was one skill, that you would recommend to people who are thinking about cabin ownership as it relates to finance and business, what would you or one piece of advice, what would you recommend, um, for people who have no experience in finance and business, but just want a cabin?
I would say passive income.
Mm,
Like I'm on vacation maybe in Italy and I get a PayPal message that I just got an Airbnb deposit, right?
yeah.
So like that passive income stream while you're also maybe doing other things and hustling in other ways is huge because you can reinvest that in other ways too. And I
Yeah.
would say don't be afraid. I said structured debt earlier, but don't be afraid of debt. There's good debt,
Yeah.
there's bad debt. I don't want 3 mortgages. I wish I had cash to pay for all of the properties I own, but I don't. I also own 6 units that we rent that are residential apartment units. It's all debt. So if you were to look at my debt to income ratio, it's probably not great. But if you were to look at my debt to income ratio with the market value of all the properties I own, it's
Yeah.
going to be fantastic. So
Yeah.
I don't, there's probably a happy medium. Don't shy away from it. But we don't live in a world where people necessarily have 300,000 in cash to go buy a cabin. If you do, that's great. But if you don't be afraid to use your investment in other things to help you grow. Like if we
Yeah.
didn't have that home equity line of credit, we could, from the decisions we made as young adults to buy a home when we were young and, build equity in it, we wouldn't have the cabins.
Yeah.
And that's good debt.
Yeah, this was a big takeaway for me because I always thought like, oh, as soon as we have extra money, we should start paying down our mortgages. And my financial advisor was like, that doesn't make any sense. Your interest is 2% on one of them,
Yes.
3.5 on the other. He's like, instead of paying that down, use that money, invest it in the market or whatever else you want. But the market's average return over time is 7%.
Right.
So
Right.
why would you pay off at 2%? Like it makes sense to pay the interest on that, reinvest it somewhere else and make more than that money. And I know this shouldn't blow my mind because it's math, but it blew my mind the first time someone said that to me because I was just like, oh, I was always taught that debt is bad. Pay it off as quickly as possible.
Sure. Right. And then, the way tax returns are structured and work too, being able to have things to write off and to claim and
Yeah.
having all that revenue coming in from rental, you need offset expenses. So
Yeah.
you have to think of it as the numbers game. So I think talking to a financial advisor, talking to an accountant, if you're not comfortable with the numbers on your own is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Laura, thank you so much for joining me. You bring
Yeah.
so much experience to this space. I feel like we only scratched the surface. But tell
Well, we'll
folks
have
where
to
they
hang
can
out
find
again,
you.
Janice. That
Yes,
would be great.
yes. Let's do it. Tell folks where they can find you.
They can find me on Juniper Hill Cabin. So Instagram at Juniper Hill Cabin, Facebook the same, and juniperhillcabin.com.
Amazing. Thank you again.